Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on Hip Hop and the Feds. We wanted to take a closer look at a pattern emerging from some high-profile cases and find out what's really going on. And we try to answer the question, are the feds targeting hip hop? A widely publicized FBI manhunt for Brooklyn-based rapper Casanova stunned many in the music industry who thought he'd left gang life, guns, and drugs behind. He's pleaded not guilty and his case is pending. Chicago rapper G Herbo was hit with federal fraud charges and also pleaded not guilty. Then there was the explosive case of Tekashi 6ix9ine.
Hip-hop is definitely being targeted by the feds. If you look at the history of hip-hop and authorities, law enforcement, you see that we've always been pursued.
AllHipHop.com broke the news in July 2020 that Amir Muhadit, formerly known as the artist Loon, was being released from federal prison after serving nearly 10 years on a heroin conspiracy charge. Loon was part of Diddy's Bad Boy roster in the early 2000s and converted to Islam in 2008. He says today's rappers take unnecessary risks, especially as men of color, by putting everything on social media.
You can't fault the federal government for using these things as leverage against us. We have to look at ourselves. We have to look at what are we contributing, to this mass incarceration? What are we contributing to these high conviction rates?
Criminal defense attorney Philip Hamilton says federal conspiracy charges give prosecutors all they need to pursue a famous artist based on the company he keeps, even if he is not the driving force in a criminal enterprise.
You have a lot of these displays on social media of, potentially illicit cash and illicit activities, lyrics that are involving potential concessions and admissions of offenses. Of course, they're going to take a look into it, and where there's something that's there that's substantive, they're going to move on it. They're going to investigate it.
There are many layers to this and questions about fairness. Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining me is Amir Muhadit. He is the artist formerly known as Loon. He came home after 9 years in federal prison last July, and he's now working as a prison reform advocate after what he saw inside. Amir, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure being here, Lisa.
We really
appreciate what you
also
do.
Joining us is attorney Philip Hamilton. He's a criminal defense attorney and partner in the firm Hamilton Clark LLP, has tried many federal cases. Phil, great to have you with us.
Lisa, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Chuck Creekmur. He is the CEO and co-founder of AllHipHop.com. They broke the story about Amir's release and his coming home last summer. Chuck, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Amir, I want to start with you on this. First of all, welcome home. It's great to have you back in the community doing positive things.
Definitely.
After doing 9 years in a federal prison, how did the reality of your experience match what people on the streets think goes on there?
I think that what people know about being in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, from the outside, definitely mirrors what goes on in the inside. This information is not something that's tainted as far as how it's communicated from people outside to inside. But when it actually happens to you, the experience in itself, it gives you a heightened sense of awareness of what's actually going on and what leads people into the federal prison system. Because many, of the individuals that end up incarcerated, they kind of like honed in on what it is that motivates them to do what they do. But once, the consequences come, it's like the federal prison system is nothing like, what takes place on state. I've heard the different stories about what happens in state prisons versus what happened in federal prison. And by design, the Federal Bureau of Prisons is definitely a behemoth. It's something that is, has contribute to mass incarceration. It's destroyed the moral fiber of communities. It's warehousing, men all across the United States. And the snowball effect is what reaches our communities. So that's why I say, the communication between what takes place, on the streets and their understanding or interpretation what takes place in the feds, it mirrors one another, but there's also unrecognized trauma, saying that definitely plays our communities.
And a lot of differences, and we want to get into your case as well, too. Attorney Philip Hamilton, in terms of the differences and what we're seeing, these federal cases, what stands out to you the most?
I mean, what always stands out to me with respect to federal cases is just the level of time and investigation that the feds will put into their cases as opposed to state cases, right? I mean, the feds are working with essentially endless, almost infinite resources that when they want to investigate a particular issue or particular subject, they can take a year, they can take 2 years, they can have the assistance of the FBI, the ATF, the DEA, they can have them all working collaboratively. They can have them working in conjunction with state task forces. The level by which they are able to just dig into their cases and, secure these indictments and basically put, defendants in a position where, you're next to impossibly going to be able to just come out of the situation clean. You look at the conviction rates, even with respect to the feds, you're always generally talking, 95% and up, particularly here in the Southern District. So the way that I'm always looking in terms of approach of a federal case as opposed to a state case is that there's going to be a lot more work, there's going to be a lot more legal writing, and you're just up against a behemoth as opposed to sometimes going against these local municipalities. It's just totally different with respect to litigation.
They basically have unlimited funds and unlimited time to go after what they want.
Absolutely, Lisa, and they will, and they will.
And we're seeing that. Chuck, you allhiphop.com broke the story about Amir, the artist formerly known as Loon, his release last summer. What struck you about his case? Because a lot of people are saying, what's up with these federal cases now against artists?
Well, I think it's pretty apparent that they have a Jones for hip hop, for young Black men, and I think that the time and energy that they put into rappers specifically, is incredible. I think if you dug up anybody and if you pursued anybody of note and wealth and so on and so forth, you're going to find something and you're going to dig up something. So to me, it just represents what all of us go through, but on a different level. I know if I drive a certain car, when I drove a 750 BMW, I got pulled over all the time. When I drove, the Hoopty, I never got pulled over. That's not actually true. But I got pulled over less. You know what I'm saying? Less. But they pulled me over for different reasons. You know what I mean? So I say all that to say, unfortunately though, but with hip hop, we put a lot of our business on social media. We put a lot of our outer, things outward to the world, and they eat it up. And we've known for the longest time that on our message board, the feds were watching, and our comments and things, everything. Now it's social media. It's so much more heightened now.
And there's so much more that's out there. And we're going to get into the social media aspect. Amir, in terms of your case, was it a conspiracy case? Because that's what we're hearing. We're hearing that conspiracy word a lot.
Yeah, definitely a conspiracy case. And that is where the feds are more successful as far as their conviction rate. Because with the umbrella of conspiracy is so broad, that you can have the slightest, involvement with underneath that umbrella, and you will actually be held accountable for the same consequences as the person that's directly involved. So in my case, it was really about hearsay and what they call ghost dope, meaning dope that doesn't even exist. You know what I'm saying? So for example, the individuals that was in the conspiracy, they got convicted and sentenced in 2009, if I'm not mistaken. I was already out the country. I was in Egypt. I was at Al-Azhar University studying my religion and so on and so forth, and traveling the world as a motivational speaker. You know what I'm saying? So I was completely out of the way, you know what I'm saying, and removed from any activity that would even be remotely close to the hip hop culture or the streets, So it happened when I landed in Belgium that I found out that I had an indictment in the Eastern District of North Carolina, for conspiracy to possess with intent a kilo or more heroin. A drug that I've never sold. Like, I had my histories in the streets, but heroin was never in the equation.
One of the things that you sold. So a conspiracy, I'm gonna stop right there. We're gonna take a short break. When we come back, could you be involved in a conspiracy and not even know it? You've left the music industry behind. You left the party and the whole lifestyle that was going on back then. You're traveling around the world. You're studying your faith. You're going through this kind of spiritual evolution. And then you land in Belgium and you find out you got a federal indictment for dealing heroin.
Yeah.
What's going through your mind?
I mean, it took me a lot to put my finger on what was actually happening to me, because at the time I was actually in the process of paying back taxes. So I used to call my tax attorney all the time. Every time I got on a plane, like, yo, you sure? Ain't got no problem. You gave Wesley Snipes like 5 years for taxes. You sure? So it's more like me worried about that. So when they grabbed me and they told me that you have an indictment, I said, no, y'all must got the wrong guy. It got to be another, you know what I'm saying, Chauncey Hawkins somewhere around here. You can't be talking about me. So it took me 6 months in Belgium to fight my extradition, because there was a lot of things that the feds were trying to do to me while I was there. Actually, a DEA agent came out there and tried to blend in with the United Nations guy and try to, like, finagle some information out me until, me, I'm like, all right, well, who you? You're like, well, I'm agent such and such, So now I ain't got nothing to say to you. I ain't got nothing to say to you. Matter of fact, I don't even need the UN. I'm cool, because I felt like I don't even know what's going on. Y'all trying to trip me up. So it took me 6 months to fight my extradition so that I can land in the United States and deal with the matter at hand. Now, the issue of mandatory minimums, you know what I'm saying? I was looking at what Congress says, 10 years of life for the charge I was getting, but I had 2 prior convictions. So like Philip will tell you, now they're threatening me with 2 851 enhancements.
What is that?
Ultimately,
hold on a second, Phil, what is that 851 enhancement?
So it's an enhancement that's based upon, and Amir, I don't know what your prior convictions were, be they at the state level, be it at the federal level.
Drug related. They were drug related.
Okay, so then exactly. So to the extent that you have like a drug related offense or one that involved violence, now ultimately, even if you're charged with an underlying offense that otherwise would give you a lower base level, your sentencing exposure can now be enhanced based upon the elements of those prior offenses that you were convicted of. So to the extent that you had 2 prior drug-related offenses, that's why you got hit with those enhancements. And that's where you talk about the distinction between, again, state and federal. It's those enhancements that start to give you serious, serious time with no wiggle room out. Like you said, there's no shock, there's no Willard, there's none of these programs that just like let you just come out. And those enhancements will hit you. So
so basically 10 years of life, 1 enhancement will go to 20 to life, and the second one will go to mandatory life.
So wait, hold on 1 second. So you're getting time for something you did in the past.
Absolutely.
That's already another old, like an old case.
You're getting enhanced for something that you already suffice. Like these charges have already been, they already been dealt with. So now with 1 prior, you can get enhanced from 10 to life to 20 to life. With a second prior, you can get mandatory life. So if I went to trial and blew, I would have got mandatory life for hearsay and invisible dope. So this is where the trial tax, we call that the trial tax. We don't want to take the trial tax because that's life. So you take, the plea, which led to me getting a 14-year sentence.
Chuck, when you look at who's in prison, though, you look at the prison population, you look at how, there's also the publicity. You're a media person. It's like when charges are brought against a rapper, it instantly goes viral. It goes around the world. Whatever news organization is putting it out is getting millions of hits on all their platforms. It's almost instant celebrity status for that particular prosecutor or that particular office.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at it and it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're able to not only convict based on perception and what people their preconceived thoughts about rappers and artists and Black men, and then also, like I said, the inherent pursuit is racist in and of itself. So I think that rappers they're just, you get it on both sides. We drive the industry musically, and then you're able to then drive this other population as well, because there's this idea that they're already guilty, and then you have to plead guilty just to avoid something like Amir said, a life sentence. And so it looks like you're guilty when you're actually very highly likely innocent. If that makes any sense. So it's crazy, man. We've all had some sort of a situation. I had one myself. And, at that time, it was much a lesser type of situation. But, you had to plead guilty or else you're looking at years in jail. And who wants to do that?
Phil, in terms of what Amir was talking about and what Chuck were talking about, the trial tax, and there's a perception that the system is rigged, and especially if you're a man of color, the system is really rigged against you. If you happen to be a celebrity, man, they're going to try to dig up absolutely everything that they possibly can. And then you look at hip hop, where so many of our greatest talents have come from the streets and try to leave the streets behind, but sometimes the streets don't leave them behind. And it's almost like a perfect storm for these prosecutors.
The trial tax, otherwise known as the trial penalty, you know, in many respects, it is real, especially like if you're engaged in a lot of, you know, pre-trial plea negotiations, and, you know, you're able to kind of, you know, figure out like, all right, what charges are we dealing with? You can charge bargain. You know, maybe this charge isn't coming with the mandatory minimum, which leaves you a little bit more eligible to, you know, potentially maybe walk away with house arrest, or to walk away with some kind of minimal you know, exposure.
Phil, is there a difference between a cooperator and somebody who's a snitch? Amir's shaking his head. Amir, you want to take that? Amir says no?
No, it ain't. I mean, it's the same thing. It's one and the same. Like, this is the thing that, you know, I've learned from just my previous dealings with the street. You know what I'm saying? So this situation that came after I had made so many different changes in my life, you still don't abandon what you understand about, you know, this code of ethics, so to say.
Right.
No. Just to give you a minor detail, my situation was an introduction. You know, Philip, that's Chuck, that's Phil, y'all good, y'all got y'all stuff straight, I'm out. So I'm like the car rental guy. That was the extent of me. But the investigation itself is about this thick. You know what I'm saying? Is all kinds of, you know, things that have been investigated through the whole duration of the conspiracy. But my role was about that small. But even with that being said, I'm never going to be at liberty, you know what I'm saying, to take another man's freedom or hurt another person when I'm the person that's involved in this. They didn't call that person's name. They didn't indict that other person. So I have to face these consequences, even though I didn't share any of the accolades or benefits from this conspiracy. You know what I'm saying? So I believe that to be that honorable thing that Chuck is talking about, is like, you can't enjoy all this stuff. You can't have all the fun. You know what I'm saying? Especially when you know you're driving a car that's going to eventually run out of fuel. You know what I'm saying? So when that happens, you have to be man enough to accept the sour that comes with the sweet. You know, so it's like, you know, you look at, like, back in our generation, you know, you had what they call conscious rappers. These were guys that was rapping about things that was uplifting, educational, informative, and so on and so forth. They wasn't entertaining the streets and all of that stuff. You understand? They chose a lane. But now you have all these other artists, you know what I'm saying, ensembles of them, and just an influx of them just keep coming out with the same narrative about beating these streets. So when that comes down, you know what I'm saying, you have to understand the consequences they apply the same way that they do in the street. You know what I mean? You're just doing it from a whole different perspective.
Exactly.
So by exposing all of this stuff to law enforcement and making their job extremely easy, you know what I'm saying, and condemning yourself and removing yourself from all of the fun that you say you enjoy, all of the fun that you say you worked hard to achieve, you're putting it on the line every time and every day that you exploit, you know what I'm saying, this narrative about you being this trap dude, you being this dude. I don't even see females no more in these guys' videos. It's just a bunch of dudes, you know what I'm saying, with a bunch of guns and a bunch of money. And it's like, yo, that looks like prison.
Chuck, final word. In terms of hip hop's responsibility, is there a responsibility, especially with some of these up and coming rappers? What's your take on what advice you would leave people with?
My take on is listen to the OGs, to the younger artists, to the younger generation. Listen to the OGs, learn their stories, even if you don't get to meet them, but listen to them, because, and I think this is happening, by the way. I think that we have artists like, say, Amir, we have Royce da 5'9", Exhibit, and others that are sharing their wisdom, sharing their knowledge. And I believe that a lot of it is getting through to the younger generation. But as always, you know, we do have those that amass a certain amount of respect, money, influence, and maybe they're harder to reach because they don't see what can actually happen. They don't believe it can happen to them.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on Hip Hop and the Feds. You can watch it again and see other episodes on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.